Thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm Rosemarie Belanger, Program Chair for the year. And, I couldn't be more pleased and really honored to have David and his partners here tonight. You're in for a real treat. David started his companies, the founder and president of 1024 Digital Solutions. What he's going to be talking about tonight is really the bootstrapping approach to a very exciting new project and program that he started last year. Well, actually, you started in 2010, but you launched last year, right? Yeah, right. Big national trade show, Slatwall e-commerce. You'll be hearing about that. What David won't be telling you about tonight is the kind of people they are, and that is something that I think we really want to honor and remark upon. They established a beachhead downtown, the first technology company. They've embraced all of us who are in the entrepreneurial community in Worcester. They support nonprofits. They help people. They've hired our local students. I can't say enough about them as people. I know they're great business people. But when companies give back, it really is a tremendous honor to have them here. And his two partners are here as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce David. And we'll probably hold questions until after. And we'll have a lounge Q&A, and you can throw all your tricky questions at him. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rosemarie, and thanks to the Venture Forum for inviting me here today. This is really cool. I'm excited to do this. I put together a couple of slides. This is not a long presentation. I just wanted to give people kind of a sense of who we are and what we do as a company, and some of the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. This is we're a software company, so this is kind of our mantra that we live by every day. We build software that gives our clients a competitive advantage. That's our goal in every project that we build and every product that we build. I started the company in 2008. It was just myself for the first 2 years, working out of my house with contractors. Sumit and Brad, two of my partners here, came on board in January 2010. We hired our first employee in June of that year. We moved into an office, finally, out of my house in my basement, which my wife was pretty happy about, in 2010. And we've grown since then. We moved to downtown Worcester in the Franklin Street, 20 Franklin Street building, the old Telegram Gazette building. That's our new office, in December of last year, so it's been just over a year. We did that for a couple of reasons. We were having a really hard time recruiting young development talent into Northborough, which is where we were, not very far away. But if you're talking to college graduates, trying to get them to come to some office condo in Northborough just wasn't happening. So the choice for us was go to Boston or go to Worcester. And I've lived here for a fairly long time, and I know Worcester, and I know some of the issues that it has and some of the baggage that it carries. But we really saw a lot of good things happening, and took us 2 years of going through the process of making sure it was the right decision, but really felt like making the 5-year commitment to this space, with hopefully beyond that, was worth it. So it's been a year. We've hired 3 local college students since then. So that's worked out really well. We haven't lost any employees, which was another concern. Kind of, Northborough to Worcester is not very far, but you add that extra 15 or 20 minutes, and they're not parking 10 feet away from the front door anymore. They're parking behind the building and walking through an alley and all those other issues that we were concerned about. But nobody has left, and the community around that building in particular and Worcester has been great. So we're really happy with that move. This is where we are right now. We've got 12 developers. That includes both my partners. We have a project manager, 2 project administrators, and then I'm the supply officer. I'm the guy that makes sure they have coffee and everything they need to get their stuff done. My son always asks me, "What do you do?" And you just get coffee. That's all you do? I said, "Yeah, that's pretty much it." So we call ourselves a bootstrap startup. Since, as Rosemarie mentioned, since 2010, we've been building a software product, and People probably know the term bootstrap, but all that means is that in order to build that product, we've done that through service revenue. We've bootstrapped the development of that product through money we get by doing projects, essentially. We haven't taken any outside money other than some I took when I started in '08 from a couple of friends. We have a line of credit, but we estimate that we've invested about $1.5 million of actual dollars and time into this product over the last 5 years. This is the product, Slatwall Commerce. So it's a very robust enterprise-level e-commerce platform. It basically allows anybody that's selling products, either online or offline, to manage those products in an administrative, in an interface, a web interface, manage the orders, right? So people who are buying those products and the orders they place and the fulfillment and the accounts associated with those. There's a lot built around that as well, things like promotions and pricing and inventory, et cetera, et cetera. Just to give you a sense, these are some of the clients. So in bootstrapping, what we've done is worked really closely with a small number of clients over these 5 years. Building features based on their specific specs. So they weren't something that we thought somebody might want, or we had researched and thought the marketplace might want. Our clients actually came to us and said, this is how we need to handle inventory, and that's what we did. So Inc. in the middle there is probably a name that a lot of people might recognize. Inc. Magazine is a client. They use our software to manage selling their archived magazines. They also have a new subscription product that they launched called Inc. Plus, which is $4.99 a month or something like that. That's sold through our Slatwall platform. Fast Company is a sister magazine, so we're also working on those projects as well. Hayabusa is a MMA, mixed martial arts, manufacture gear for mixed martial arts, the gloves and all the other equipment. They're the largest in the Northeast, or North America, sorry, based out of Canada. So they use our product to manage inventory in multiple warehouses in Canada and in Vegas. They sell wholesale and retail. ESI Ergonomic is a ergonomic furniture manufacturer out of Phoenix. They manufacture and sell wholesale, ergonomic furniture, standing desks, and those kinds of things. A couple of others. Vanessa is a wine distributor out of California. They mainly sell through clubs, so if you're part of American Express, you can use those points to buy into a wine club through Vanessa, and they then ship those things out on a monthly basis. So all of those orders are being processed through Slatwall. So just some of the different kinds of clients that we've worked with over the last 5 years. So we've spent this 5 years building this, what we feel is a really robust product, and working with a lot of cool clients. And we have some SaaS revenue. We have some recurring revenue. People pay us on a monthly basis because we manage the infrastructure, the servers around that website. And that can be anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000 a month. We probably have just short of $500,000 in SaaS revenue right now. But we're still growing at 15 to 20% a year because we're a service business. And that's not where we want to be. So what we're doing now as a company is taking a step back and looking at how can we take this really cool product that we have and make that more of a self-service SaaS software product. So we can onboard people more quickly, we can build that recurring revenue more quickly, and we can scale in a much different way than as we are now. So that's basically where we are today, and a little bit about what we're doing.
So we thought, in deference to the weather tonight, we would just move right into Q&A, and there's a lot of my friends and colleagues here tonight. So I have a list of questions for David, but I'm sure you'd much rather hear your own questions, and I know specifically a lot of entrepreneurs have come tonight to hear from David.
My question might need you to hearken back to your early days. So basically, I'm in a newer company. It's a very impressive IT and data services company, and we like to help growing companies handle all of the business aspects that have technical solutions, so server hosting, database optimization, working out, scaling up your products to a larger market. So basically anything that isn't just making the product and is distracting you from development, we like to help with. And we're running into a problem because of who our core demographic is. A lot of times, companies that are just transitioning out of startup are still very afraid to give money to anything because they're afraid that they can't spend any money because that's the mindset they've had to live with. Or they're on the other side and they're like, oh, well, shouldn't I just be hiring everybody and doing it all in-house and never sleeping if I don't have enough people to do it? And I'm just wondering how you maybe got through, if you dealt with that as a growing pain early on, if you were ever freaking out because every single client was super important to you and you were afraid to lose any and having trouble getting more, like what your experiences was with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of answers in there. So just a bit about my background. I'm not a software developer. These guys will laugh. I don't want to see code. I don't care about code. I could care less, right? So I was involved with another company, similar software type company before, and I was in the kind of sales and project management side of things. So that's what I was good at, right? So finding new clients and getting new clients was not my issue. My issue was getting the projects done, right? Now, in order to do that, you're either outsourcing or you're bringing that talent in-house. So that's also very expensive, right, bringing that talent in-house. So I knew immediately that I needed to find a partner, someone who had skin in the game, and when I didn't get a paycheck, he wasn't getting a paycheck. So that was my first kind of, search and find, and I found two of them in the process. We had worked together previously, so we knew each other, and they just Brad and Smith just happened to be kind of available at the same time. So I had them on board, which brought, where I was probably sending 80% of my revenue out the door to outside developers. Now we were keeping, not all of it probably, but 60% of that in-house, right? So that was a big thing for me, and it also made getting projects done easier. And I knew if something needed to be done at 2 o'clock in the morning, these guys were going to get it done, right? It was easy to start a company. Getting a phone. I used Skype for phone for the first 2 years. I didn't need to buy a fax machine or, the startup cost was get a laptop, right? And that's really, I had a landing page as a website for literally the first year. I spent no money on any of that. I did spend money on a lawyer and an accountant, and I didn't skimp on that. And I still work with both of those guys, but they were from decent-sized firms and they weren't cheap, and they came in real handy. So I don't know if that answers your question entirely, but
A little bit on that point. In our startup,
yeah.
we've hired some employees and we want to continue paying them by
Mhm.
getting more clients. But the clients seem to be in a very niche audience who are very resistant to what really, honestly, they need.
Right.
So I'm just trying to figure out how to address them and get them to
In a way.
money.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a marketing kind of issue. I don't know if there's ways for you to do free trials or, the projects that we do are not inexpensive, right? They're probably on average $100,000 to $150,000. So we're dealing with mid-market companies. They're 10 to 80 or $100 million in revenue. When cost is an issue, we have this kind of front-end engineering piece, which is a kind of a shorter commitment, right, in terms of time and money. And there's a deliverable at the end of it. There's real value in that, but it's a lot easier to sell that, get buy-in from that. And we've been doing that for probably 3 or 4 years, and that's worked really, really well. It's not a free trial, but it at least gives them an experience of working with us. And again, they get a lot of value out of it. We do prototype and wireframe and kind of project specs, and that's 6 to 8 weeks or so. And so we get paid for our time, and hopefully we get the project coming out of the tail end of that. But if there's some way to kind of get them to try and buy or get something in the door, again, I don't know your product and how it's priced, but it seems like a kind of a marketing sales issue really.
the things you do differently, Dave, you're looking back now at the crystal ball, I mean, everything doesn't always go right, but in getting you started, some of the different pitfalls and how you overcame them.
It's a good question. It's not a pitfall, but I know one of the only reasons I got to this point today was because I did the accounting for my house, my home. If my wife did our checkbook and the savings account and everything else, there's no way I would be sitting here today. So, that was a good thing, and I'm glad that I did that. But if she had a chance to really, pay attention to what our finances were like at some points, and there's a lot of luck involved. People, I talked to probably a dozen people before I started the company that had done similar things, and a lot of them said, whatever money you think it's going to take to get there, double it at least. And so I did that, and it was probably triple or quadruple that. It was way more time and money to get and keep going than I had thought. So those first 2 years were tough, and clients came in at the exact right time. Like I said, I relied on a couple of friends. They both gave a chunk of money to kind of get me through a couple of months, and luckily I was able to pay them back really quickly. But I don't have any specific regret really, other than if I had had the luxury of knowing I was going to do this sooner than I did, I would have saved up, and not had to max the credit card and do all those other things,
The Wall Street Journal has a handbook for startups, and they say that you need to budget $50K to start any kind of a business. Do you agree with that number?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that's probably low. If I had to do it again, yeah, I'd want at least that kind of as a reserve. Again, I probably went through that, but a lot of it was credit card, and I would rather have not done that again. So, yeah, I mean, if you don't have that kind of in the bank, or somebody who can get that to you, in some way, or in credit, then I wouldn't think about it. There's just so many pitfalls you're going to go through. Projects not come in, people not pay, et cetera, et cetera. You need that cushion. So that, depending on the business, $50K, you need something for sure. I think maybe you figure it out on, what do you actually need to live on a monthly basis? I would make sure you have at least 6 months of that in reserve before I think about it.
So I'm curious, Dave, along the same lines, why you decided to bootstrap, given what you're saying. Was it naivete, or did you think it through? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we thought it through. So the first 2 years, I had an idea for a product. I mean, I wrote a business plan, which of course, changed 15 times since then. But in the business plan, I had an idea for a platform that kind of aggregated data. It was more marketing focused than e-commerce focused. But the idea was to build that product and build a SaaS model. 2 years later, when these guys came on board and we kind of switched focus to the e-commerce world, the first thing we decided was we were going to make the product open source. And it's not a proprietary software, right? So that was one big decision for us. And we did that for a lot of different reasons. One, we had utilized open source software. We really liked the community aspect to it. But it also allowed us to land most of those projects that you saw up there, because we were able to walk into a Scientific American magazine who had spent a year trying to implement a large enterprise, it was NetSuite, and replace that with us, a 10-person at the time company with a brand new product, because we were open source. Their developers could see the software, see the code, understand that it could do what we said it could do, right? They weren't just looking at fancy PowerPoints and testimonial videos. And that's how we landed probably 80% of the projects that we got. So that open source piece was a big reason. I don't know that we, for me, I want to have, the most skin in the game. We were never at a point where we said, we need money in order to make this grow. I don't know that we sat down and made a conscious decision that we were going to bootstrap this versus, one day made that decision. But even to this day, if we can get to where we want to get to without bringing on additional money, I'd want to do that. That may not happen. We may get to the point where we need to scale more quickly than we can through just revenue coming in. So, again, it wasn't a one day we sat down and said, we're bootstrapping this. It just kind of happened organically, and we just decided we want to take it as far as we could,
So you say when you started the company, your idea was a SaaS product, and
Yeah.
that evolved over time. But then you had this other project work. How much of that project work was focused around building the product, and how much of it was, hey, I got a project, someone's going to pay me money, hey, good to have a paycheck coming in for a few months, and how do you balance we have, this isn't really relevant to driving the product versus cash in hand?
It's a day-to-day balance, right? So we started building in 2010. We launched version 1 in 2011. So, from 2008 through 2011, none of the revenue we brought in was related to this slat wall product. From then on, it's constantly kind of grown, right? So probably now 85% of our revenue comes in through delivering slat wall as a project, right? And the others are, one thing we did do, we have a framework that we've built that kind of is the foundation of slat wall. We now utilize that same exact framework for a custom project, right? So we've got, we got scale and economies of scale across. Even if you came to us and said we want to build a completely custom application, we would still use the same framework, right? So our developers can work across both. Things that we build into one, custom project can be ported over and perhaps used on the slat wall side. But it is a constant, juggling act. And there are things that we want to build into slat wall that a client's never going to pay for whatever reason. So, it's balancing that too between, we have 2 clients that want to pay for this really cool feature, but, we've got this other piece of functionality we know is going to cost us 80 hours of work that we have no revenue coming in. And trying to, and make sure that we still have enough cash, that month to pay everybody. So it's a constant balancing act, constant.
I guess you just started to go through some of the points that I was going to ask about. So when you talk about open source and you're putting a platform out there and you're saying now it's a software as a service. So really about version control, right? Because now you're open source. How do you deal with the costs associated with that, and what type of issues would you run into when you are at a point where you're providing multiple customizations and installs, and you have this base software that you've put out? So how do you control costs when it comes to something like that?
So that's the single tenant, multi-tenant conversation that we've been kind of, right now, we're a single tenant installation, right? So every single project we launch sits on its own version, and is managed in that way, right? In order to move to, more of a true SaaS, we need to be multi-tenant, where you've got one code base, right? And so that's a we've done that before. We actually have a email marketing platform called Send24, which is one single code base. And in a previous company, we've done that. So we need to make that transition, right? So we aren't managing hundreds of different installs at 100 different versions, and it becomes a support issue and everything else. That's something we're doing this year, actually.
With it being open source, do you have any fears that can be phased out?
Meaning somebody else will take the, we think, sure, that crosses our mind. It is a very complex application. I can't imagine, somebody could actually just take it and say we're an implementer, right? And kind of become a competitor on the project side of things, perhaps. That hasn't happened yet, but that's certainly potential. But somebody actually taking the code base and kind of running it on a different fork or something, I don't worry about that too much. there's, so many thousands of hours in there. It would be really hard for them to do. It would be cheaper for them to just buy us, right? and let us kind of take it from there if that's what they wanted to. For them to come up to speed would, just take way too long. And that's, at least I hope.
That brings up the issue of intellectual property.
We have none.
Yeah, okay. And are you also going international? Are you doing projects in other countries where they have no respect for intellectual property?
Yeah, I mean, it's open source, so we have done projects in other countries. I mean, Hayabusa is Canada, but we have done some in Europe. Somebody just launched a project in New Zealand using Slotwall. Other developers around the world, we have 300 or so developers in a Google group that use Slotwall on a daily basis, and they're launching projects constantly using Slotwall, and they ask us questions for free on the Google group. Sometimes they pay us money if they need extra support. But there is no IP. It's a general public license, and that's just the way it is, right? So we were talking to Brian, where is he? Earlier, there he is, about that, that equation, and he was asking if we've had anybody kind of step on the license at all and kind of try to take it and make it a proprietary solution, and we haven't yet. I mean, we may come across it, but it hasn't been an issue to date. Could be because we're obviously a little bit under the radar, and may become an issue later, but we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today without it being open source. So, I wouldn't change that decision, going back.
Can you just talk a little bit more about all the benefits of open source and your Google group and those kind of things?
Yeah, so, there's lots of kind of feel-good benefits to open source, right? You're giving back to a community, and we have like 300 developers that ask really good questions, and some of them are on there answering questions for other people, which is great. They contribute code back. I think we've had 40 or so contributors back to the code base, just building integrations, like payment providers in Europe or shipping providers in Canada, and they'll build the integration and then just contribute it back. So those are all really good things. Again, I think the biggest thing for us, or at least for me, in terms of getting clients on the revenue side, was taking the barrier of a proprietary software off the table, and making them feel comfortable that if we didn't work out, right, as a company, and disappeared, the code base is there, and their developers could take it and run with it. There's a group of developers in that they could go to and ask questions, and that, again, is where most of our large projects came from. We would go to developer conferences and speak, and from there we would get these projects. That's essentially the only marketing we did for the first 4 years or so. So that's the biggest thing for us.
You answered part of the question I was going to ask concerning outside contributors. How do you manage those, and how do you incorporate their code into your code base? And I was going to say not lose your hair, but
carefully.
I guess I'm too late for that.
Carefully. They have to sign a contributor agreement, which the lawyer has written up. Then we have to review the actual code that they've written, run it through our review process and our testing process before we commit it to the core. So as a contributor, you're not allowed to just go and contribute code into the core. That has to go through our process, and you have to sign that agreement. And that's worked really well so far.
Somewhat related to that, what if your clients want some proprietary capability incorporated? Is
Yep.
that a different issue for you?
No, not really. I mean, we can build custom integrations. We've built Slotwall in a way that's very easy to do. So it can sit kind of parallel to the existing code base. It doesn't affect upgrades or upgrade paths. If we're launching a new version that they need, that custom code can kind of sit in a parallel bucket and not be affected. We knew that was going to happen, so we architected it in a way that we could take that into account. Now, nobody has come to us and said, we want to take the entire code base and have a commercial license for it separate that you support us on. There are other open source products that do that. We haven't done that yet. We haven't had anybody that it's asked. Most of the clients that we talk to understand that they're getting, again, $1 million+ of development for nothing, literally. And they are more than happy if they build some new feature into the, gift cards or something along those lines, that it goes back into the code base. Our SaaS model, part of that is that we deliver version upgrades as part of that monthly fee. So they see all of these new features that are being built out. They get those rolled out to them automatically, right? That's part of the benefit as well. And we haven't had anybody that's kind of balked at that open source model and wanting to be part of that community.
At some point, you said you were going to think about bringing outside investor money. Do you see that as the code being open source code being an issue when you try
Yeah, it's
to-
possible. I haven't had the conversations to know. I mean, if they're going to come in with their money, they want to see an exit, right? So, we'd have to get ourselves to some much different numbers on a recurring revenue standpoint in order for that to be, I think, viable. So it isn't. I don't think it's something that's on the table today. But we are 2017 and 18. We're looking to double our revenue in 17 and double again in 18. Maybe by that point, I don't think the open source is going to matter so much as the fact that we have $5 million a year in recurring revenue. In a platform, an e-commerce platform that any e-commerce platform is difficult to get out of, right? It's not an easy, push a button and export into some other system. It's painful to leave. So, our retention is really high, and it's not a month-to-month kind of thing.
Hi, if this is a fair question, I'd like to kind of leave your specific field a little bit, and I wonder if you could just talk generally about something I think I'm hearing you say that is a common issue with technology companies that start off essentially as service companies and then want to become product companies. And it sounds like you're struggling with that issue and you're making progress on it. But again, if it's fair, could you try to kind of generalize and talk about your thought process of how you're going to get to that point?
I can try. We're in the middle of it. For us, it's we have this large application, right? That you saw the kind of cross section of clients. There's a lot of different verticals that we've dealt with. The one commonality to all of them is they're very complex projects, which means that there's a lot of professional services that went into delivering those, right? That doesn't lend itself to a SaaS model, right? Kind of come in, sign up, and run with it. So we've struggled with taking pieces of the functionality that we have. Scientific American Magazine uses our software to do subscriptions, right? It's a kind of a paywall. And do we take that one piece of functionality, carve that off, and deliver that as a SaaS product, right? Simple to sign up, put in your information, get a little piece of code, stick it on your site, and you can sell access, right? That's one. And there are other we have events that we can sell within Slatwall, carve that off and sell like an Eventbrite, right, kind of product. Or do we take the entire application and just make the onboarding process much faster and smoother and quicker, so we can make it more self-service, and we can onboard people a lot faster for a lot less upfront money, so we can build that recurring revenue more quickly. That's where we are literally as of, what's today, Tuesday? That was yesterday afternoon. So hopefully we'll have that figured out by February, tomorrow, yeah. Almost, February 1 or so. And the idea is to, whatever we're going to do, get out there, test it in the first half of this year, prove whichever direction we're going to works or doesn't work. And if it doesn't, move on. If it does, kind of invest in the infrastructure we're going to need in order to do that. The tests I'm talking about be marketing tests, right? Getting a landing page up, can we actually generate leads? And if we can, then let's see if we can convert those things and invest in the infrastructure and additional marketing to kind of launch it as a product.
Brian, you have an expertise, obviously, as a patent attorney, and you raise a really good point. I look at Dave and what he's doing. He's providing a service, but in the meantime, he's also developing a product within that service, which can be licensed out maybe in the future, and you're protecting your model. You don't have the patent, but very carefully. And I run at MBI as an example. Lots of companies like, Gormley and his predictive analytics and his chemical piece that he's using, or Wengender with Blue Sky with his protein synthesis. Each one starts off as a pure service provider, but yet has a particular product that they're developing that's faster, quicker, better than maybe somebody else. So there's a dual role there. And I'd like to get your thoughts, Brian, and then back to you on what you're seeing in the market right now, because you're dealing with it.
I have to say, I love David's answer. It makes sense to try to take a kernel of the work that you've done as a service provider and productize that. And from what I've seen, that's often possible, but the entrepreneurs don't really have the expertise, and the company doesn't have the infrastructure oftentimes to support that. And they're stuck with, 80 people delivering service and one guy spending some of his time trying to sell a product to a new customer base, and it just doesn't work. So I love your approach and your patience in the bootstrapped model and developing and testing it. Makes a lot of sense, Kevin. I've got to believe you're going to be successful with that, because you've spent 10 years, 8 years, whatever it is, putting the pieces in place. And I would suggest that we have David back maybe in a year as a follow-up to give us a little bit maybe of a lesson, or even as a case presentation, a lesson on productizing your service. I think it's a fascinating, every technology company deals with it. And thanks for calling on me, Kevin.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Hopefully we have spent enough time putting together the processes and the infrastructure in place to be able to scale. We think we have, and come back in a year and I'll let you know.
So first of all, Dave, thanks for inviting us all tonight, you too, Rosemary, and congratulations on your success, and I wish you continued success with your company. It's a great story to hear. So I've had the fortunate experience working for 4 or 5 different technology companies, some in startup mode and some Fortune 500 type companies, and always aligned to the services side of the business. Mm-hmm. And so we've grown it through the whole life cycle, from concept all the way through to let's close this service down because it's no longer adding value. So if you look at the entire life cycle, if you will, of a product and the services attached to it, there's certain pieces that are sustainable annuity components that you want, the retainable piece you talked about. And then there's the pieces that are transactional in nature, tied to maybe a SAL or an implementation or something. So I'm just curious, if you go further upstream, the preparation, the prepare, and the assess, that's more of a consultant kind of a model, where you can get in and kind of get some skin in the game, if you will, and really get in tight with that. Not only the software gets in tight, but also the relationship gets in tight. Mm-hmm. And then on the downward side, the ongoing operation or optimization of the services, annuity stream associated with that, document control, version control, those type of things. But right in the middle, the implementation phase or the installation phase, we've always kind of found that we wanted to create an ecosystem around us and not build out the infrastructure. So are you guys, and a lot of times those margins really go down really, really low. And a lot of times there's infrastructure support issues, and a lot of times there's scalability issues with that as well, and you don't want to necessarily absorb the costs. So have you guys considered maybe an ecosystem and partnering for the implementation and installation type phases, and then keeping the sustainable and relationship-oriented components of the service in place?
Yeah, we have, and we're looking at a bunch of different options on that end right now, right? So things like AWS and, other platforms that are going to, being multi-tenant is going to help in that, infrastructure, where we can layer multiple clients on one code base as opposed to, launching different instances every single time. It's going to help from a support standpoint. It's going to help from a, just a cost perspective. Really cool new tools like Docker and et cetera, right? So those are all kind of on the table right now. We have a relationship with a traditional kind of data center now that provides basically an enterprise service to us, right? So they handle all the hardware and everything else, and we just deal with our own kind of virtual machines within that, which has worked out pretty well to the point where we're at now. But we're that's all part of this kind of evaluation process. If we get to this, SaaS model, what's the infrastructure that lays behind that allows us to scale really quickly?
And let me just ask you a quick follow-up question, right? So you mentioned earlier, right, easy to get into business. A lot of people get into business with, $5,000 or $10,000, right? So you're at this point where you've had success up to this point, looking ahead 3, 4, 5 years, right? The exit strategy, which could be something that you've talked about or looked at. What's your couple of strategic initiatives that you're really focusing on to get you over the next couple of years to where that exit strategy is for you? What do you see in the future?
It's really this SaaS model, right? I mean, that's where we, for us to build the recurring revenue, that's what we're focused on. And if we can build that to a certain, scale, then we become more attractive from that perspective. And again, it's not an IP play right now. It's going to be getting that kind of recurring revenue to a certain point.
So I apologize if you'd already answered this and I missed it, but have you been considering, and you were talking about needing to figure out which part of the product you're actually going to productize and turn into the SaaS model. Have you considered a product suite and using different functionalities as different products?
Yep.
Or if not, what's your thought process there? Why or why not would you go for that?
There's a couple of factors there. We've considered all of the above, right? And part of it is how quickly can we test market? Is the market there? What's the competition look like, right? So a lot of it is those questions are around the opportunity, the marketing opportunity, the business opportunity in whatever particular space. I mentioned paywall. So it's looking at who are the players in that space, what are they priced at, where do we compare feature-wise, how quickly can we test market to that space, right? How costly is that going to be, buying keywords and those kinds of things. And then what do we need to do from an infrastructure standpoint in order to get our kind of MVP out the door, right? So those are all things that we're looking at with any of those, whether it's a suite of products, an individual product, a combination. Those are the things we've taken into account. And how do they scale, right? I mean, what's the overall market for that particular offering? Where does that get us 2 years from now, 3 years from now?
Excuse me. So you had said that you had a product you were in your basement and you're not a coder, you're not a computer guy, even the SaaS model and those types of things. Where do you go? So you have an idea, and where do you take it? What did you do with it?
Yeah. So I had been at a software development company for 5 years or so. So I knew the process. I didn't, code I didn't know, but I did know a lot about kind of the process and what it took to build a project or a product, which was certainly helpful. The product that I originally started out with was, again, it was kind of aggregating marketing data, from email, from content management, from Salesforce, from a couple of different platforms, and bringing it all into one kind of dashboard. It was more about visualizing data around marketing. I felt like there was a product for that at the time. Did a bunch of research and went about the same process, essentially. I went out and sold websites, right? That was my revenue. Content managed web projects. And with that revenue, I started investing into this marketing suite that I wanted to build. Again, these guys came into the picture, and that didn't come to fruition. We kind of switched gears a bit. At that point, it was finding the right people to help build the platform. There was some other technical CTO type individuals that I knew and I'd networked with. I was working with them on a kind of a part-time basis. They were interested in perhaps becoming part of the company as well, so they were investing some time helping me to understand what back-end, database and server language and all those other things that we would use. So we had chosen those. Then I went out and found somebody that we could work with. I didn't. You can do that cheaply offshore. I made a conscious decision not to do that. I had seen some of the issues that can come with it. I was ready and willing to spend the, whatever extra to use on onshore developers. We still had that philosophy. We're not an offshore development house, and even though Sumit is from India, we could easily do it. We've got plenty of connections, but we choose to do all of our development onshore. So I found somebody actually in New Hampshire. They were great. I had one false start, and then I found them, and they did a good job kind of getting me what I needed. But I knew I needed a technical partner from day one, and that's what I was looking for. There was no way I was going to get to where I needed to be without that person, again, with kind of skin in the game. It just wouldn't have gone anywhere. So it took me 2 years to find that. And that was probably the most important piece.
Just following up that on a minute, what you stated, I believe, is that you actually started your business based on an idea for this service or this product.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a loaded question. Did you make your first sale before you had your technical people?
Oh, yeah.
And then you went chasing after the technical resources? Because that tends to be not the typical way that you get people involved in the kind of industry that you're involved with. It's typically the technical people who want to make a product, and they're busy making the product and tend to forget about sales and marketing. But
yeah, we sold our first Slatwall project before Slatwall existed.
You started 2 years before these gentlemen were
Sure,
involved.
yeah. But so I had the idea, I had the concept, I had a nice PDF that I had built about what it was going to do and how it was going to do it. I had a little prototype that I had built, and that was a part of how I got in the door on the first project that I sold. At the end of the day, what I delivered for them did what they needed to do. They didn't need all the other stuff anyway, but it certainly was part of my pitch to that first project. Now, I also had, again, 6 years of delivering these kinds of projects and references and referrals and all kinds of things, right? It wasn't like I didn't have some sort of name. Not that they knew me, but I had people I could refer them to and clients that I had worked with, and that was certainly helpful. I didn't come out of the blue, doing very similar types of projects.
Talk to me about the culture that you wanted to develop at 1024. Did you ever think about it? Did it evolve?
Yeah. Again, it was just me for the first 2 years, so the culture was pretty easy. I enjoyed myself immensely. It was great. And these guys were the first two people to join me, and we had worked together. I knew them very well, so that was, I knew we got along, and they kind of fit into what we wanted to do. So from there was when we were going to bring on new people. It's still something I use today. We still don't have an employee manual. We have no vacation policy. We have no sick day policy. For lots of different reasons. We give our employees a lot of leeway in what they do and how they do it. There's certainly structure around it. But we aren't tracking every minute of every day, where they are, how they're getting stuff done. They want to work at home, they work at home. They come into the office, they come into the office. That was really important to me from day one. The one thing I did write was a one-page communication, I don't know what to call it, statement that basically stated, you know, we don't want to hire an army of yes men. We want to be, we're smart people, we know what we're talking about. If you think there's a better way to do something, say it. Offer different solutions, and not just internally, but that's with our clients. And I think that's been one of the reasons that clients keep coming back to us, because, you know, with everything we do, there's 100 different ways to get it done. We bring to the table what we think is the best way. And if, you know, we will go back and forth with them on that, and I think that's a big part of it. You know, the other was that how we respond to clients, how we communicate with clients, how quickly we respond to them. Previous company I was at didn't do a very good job with that. And I think that that's been a mantra from day one, is how we communicate, timely communication and honest communication and all those kinds of things. So that was the one piece of kind of real document I had that I've handed to employees since the day they walked in the door. And I don't know, the culture that we've got, I think we just did employee reviews this past 2 weeks. You know, everybody is, they're really smart. They know what they're doing. We give them the tools they need to get their job done. They appreciate that. And, you know, it's worked out really well. We have a lot of fun. You know, this is dressed up for how we come into the office. You know, we're pretty casual. Casual company. I think the office space that we've got now in Worcester is, you know, competes against any space in New England. You know, I think that makes a big difference. You know, we want them to learn, and I think they appreciate that. We give them money to go to conferences and learn online and bring in guest speakers and those kinds of things. So I think that's, yeah. So it's a really cool place to go every day, and I think that is what we hear from everybody else. So far, so good. I mean, if we start to bring more people in, it might change. But so far, it's, you know, it's kind of like a small family. It's good.
So talk to me about how it feels to be a fiduciary, you know, and the responsibility that you wear every day to, you know, pay the bills and you know, facilitate paying the bills of your employees. And, you know, do you have officers and bylaws and things like that?
Yeah. You know, that's probably the toughest part. 10 months out of the year, it's not a big deal. And there's always, you know, those couple of months where it's a pain. Luckily, we've never been to the point where we've had to say, you know, holy crap, we're not going to be payroll this month. You know, knock on wood. We've cut into our own pay, but yeah, it's tough. I mean, we've got a partner agreement. We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on that. As my lawyer said, the day that we need to go back and look at that document, we know we're in trouble. But you know, they both have different expertise on the development side. They do a really good job on that. And, you know, they lean on me to just deal with the day-to-day crap. Like, you know, I'm the supply officer, right? So get everything out of the way that these guys don't have to worry about, the payroll and the benefits and the HR and all the other things that invoicing and collecting the money and those kinds of things. So it's worked out, you know, it's worked out really well. I'd love to offload some of that stuff as we get bigger, but I'm still in QuickBooks every day, you know, sending invoices and seeing who owes us money and, you know, what's in the bank and what's not in the bank. So, but yeah, one day I'd love to get that off my plate.
Yeah, I agree. It's not a lot of fun to do all that, but necessary. So I have a final question for you, very practical. Talk about the reports that you have either designed or generated or worked out with your accountant, or maybe you knew what to do, that actually help you run the company, cash flow, organizing the work, how much you need to bill per month.
Yeah. for the first couple of years, the only one I was worried about was revenue. Well, I knew how to project sales and, what was in the funnel and what might be coming in, and worked from there. Other than that, I mean, we spend more and more time on understanding where our time internally goes, right? So there's easy ways for us to bleed time in development time and what they're working on and where is that going. And if we're doing that, then we're bleeding money. So we've spent more and more time on that end of things, and what kind of reports can we look at to understand, what kind of resource allocations we need for the projects that are coming up. What does that mean for the staff we have on hand now? We know that they can deliver about 30 hours of code a week. So we do a lot of pre-estimating and resource allocation based on that, and then what does that mean at the end of the month? Did we hit that? Did we not? Why? Removing as many barriers as we can on that end, because that all translates to what are we going to invoice at the end of the month. We've moved more and more towards kind of on our service side, a retainer based, so people are paying us for a set number of hours on a monthly basis, as opposed to estimating projects and then billing a fixed amount. So that's good and bad. So if you want to estimate a fixed amount, if you're really, really good at it, maybe you say it's going to cost $10,000, and in reality it only cost you $8,000.
Right.
Great. But if not, maybe it cost you $12,000, and so there are benefits to that if you can do it and do it effectively. But most of the stuff we've been moving to is more of a retainer based. It ends up giving us more predictability in terms of revenue. It gives us more predictability in terms of what resources we're going to need, and that we can then look at, okay, when might we need to hire, because we can see, 2 or 3 months out much more easily than if we were kind of project-based. But, on the financial reporting, it's a simple just P&L. We haven't done or to date anything really sophisticated on that end. It's been more about kind of how are we managing the resources so that we know that we're going to be able to bill correctly to generate what we're going to need in order to pay payroll, and then look at that 3 to 6 months out to know when we might need to hire in order to deliver projects. That's been the big thing. The cash is really taking care of itself. It's, without having to spend hours and hours poring over reports, it's pretty easy to know whether we're going to have enough money or not. And we do have a line of credit to, cover any small shortfalls, which we haven't had to use yet either. So, that's a nice kind of cushion to have.
Any other questions from anyone else? I want to thank you. Thank you for being candid and transparent with all of us. I think we've really learned a lot from you, and I'm thrilled that you were able to come out and spend some time with us. Wish you the best. I like Brian's idea of getting you, putting you through this torture again next year.